I'm Chris Trigger. I'm one of the core faculty and social media director. We have Dr. Mancini, who's our program director, on the line with us too. Dr. McCarthy is kind of the man behind the camera. He's not really supposed to be here, and he's post-night. But so is Dr. Mancini. So we also have, let's see here, I'm going to go through the list. We have Dr. Timothy Scheel. He recently graduated, 2 years ago now? He was an ultrasound fellowship at Denver Health, and he's now in Fort Collins, Colorado. We have Dr. Kristen Whitworth, who is our simulation director here at Spectrum Health Lakeland. We have Dr. Tiffany Prophet of the infamous Emra Caster, who's taught me how to podcast to some extent. I don't know how well I'm doing with it, but
you're doing amazing. Fabulous.
I recorded with Bayer today, so you can only imagine how that went. So,
oh man, I'm excited for that one.
So it's tomorrow. So tomorrow. So for the attendees, I'll publish or post another podcast. It's called Three Dudes. So Dr. Bowden, who's a third-year resident, and Dr. Freeman, who's a fourth year, are helping me out with that. So Dr. Prophet is now in Phoenix, Arizona. How warm is it today there?
I think it was 103 today, which is a lot cooler than it has been since we moved here.
Yeah, so we're sitting at a beautiful 66 degrees here in Southwest Michigan. So, and then finally, last but not least, Dr. Eric Arnitz. He's one of our fourth-year residents who has accepted a job, is my understanding, in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. So he's just gone through this, so we kind of wanted to give you guys some kind of tips and tricks to interviews in itself. I'm going to let Dr. Mancini give a little bit of a rundown to start, and then he will fall back and just observe as we try not to sink this ship.
Well, welcome everybody. I know this year is going to be a lot different as it relates to virtual interviews and dealing with different virtual platforms. But at the end of the day, the beauty about interviews in general is they don't change whether or not they're in person or they're virtual. There's obviously pluses for virtual interviews. There's obviously negatives for virtual interviews. Regardless of how you are interviewing this year, it's just very, very important that we remain very engaged with the whole interview process, that the background that you actually have, similar to what Dr. Whitworth has back there, kind of mimics exactly what you're trying to sell. And that you have really, really, really not only planned and prepared for your interview, but you certainly perform very, very well in your interview. So again, all of this isn't much different than your normal in-person interview, except that you really, really got to spend extra time on the IT end to try to make sure your connections are where they need to be, your background is what they need to be, and you need to make sure that you act in a very professional manner, although at times it could be hard because you might be doing this in your own bedroom or your own house. But remember, this is an interview, so be as professional as you possibly can. Be as calm as you can. At the end of the day, all we're looking for is a great discussion between you and faculty and residents, so we get a better grasp of who you are, and so you yourself can choose a residency program based on fit. I think Tiffany later on will kind of go over a bunch of resources to get you guys prepared. But at the end of the day, this, again, is just a different world that we're living in for interviews. And we are all in the same world, and we'll all get through this together. Without further ado, I'll pass it back to the whole panelists. It's great to have all of you back. And I'll leave it to the great Dr. Trigger.
I would probably say infamous, because I was going to ask you something unprofessional. So please, attendees, I'm going to refer you as attendees, chime in when you want. I think that this has to be as interactive for you as it is for us, because the questions that you may have, someone else may not have, but there are a lot of resources out there. So I'm going to start with Dr. Arnitz. I will give him the floor since he just did some virtual interviews as he applied for jobs. So Dr. Arnitz, how did you feel the process went, and how did you prepare for the virtual interview?
Yeah, so I think that, things obviously during COVID were a little bit different. A lot of the communication was virtual or over the phone. So trying to get a feel for a place before you even interview is difficult, and doing a lot of background research at where you're going to be, I think, is really important to find out who you're going to be interviewing with, what their backgrounds are, and where you're going to be going, and the place and the community that they serve. I think that those were really important things. And then, finding a good place where you can interview at, where it's quiet and has good lighting, I think are important as well.
So that's important. Dr. Arnott's pointed out that you should really know about the people you're going to speak with. You should really know about the program you're applying to. The great thing about Spectrum Health Lakeland and our program is we've put a lot on our website. There's no real surprises. We are who we are. We post a lot on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and our podcasts, and also our blog. So all of our information's out there. So you guys should know as much about us as we do about you as we review your file. So I will throw it to Dr. Profit. So when you interviewed, well, let's see, you were kind of in the COVID world as you started to interview and accepted your job. What did you do to prepare for these interviews, and what tips do you have for our applicants here today?
Yes, I'd say, echoing everyone, obviously, ensuring you've got a nice quiet place, checking your audio. We've all been through a million different Zoom meetings, Microsoft Outlook meetings, WebExes, where the connection's just not great. And a lot of that can kind of depend on where you are in relation to your router, whether you're Wi-Fi, whether you're Ethernet, whether you're hardwired in. So just get all of that sorted out, see where the glitches are, choose which modality and location is going to give you just the clearest signal, the strongest signal, and the clearest audio. The other thing that is kind of different for us when we're interviewing, we usually think we're entering a space, in pre-COVID world, and the space is really set up by the interviewer. As the interviewee, we're bringing that interviewer into our space. So it's now into our domain, and we can set it up any way we want. You can actually use your background. I just have a plain background right now behind me, just my wall. But you can strategically place objects that you want to use as talking points and you want to use to emphasize your CV. It's something that the interviewer doesn't even realize, but they're going to be distracted by things behind you, just like you might be distracted by things behind them in the pre-COVID world in their office. And they say, oh, where did that poster come from? That picture, that object. And just really be strategic in terms of paying attention to everything that's behind you in the room and visible from your camera. And that's, again, practice, just kind of practicing going through with friends, family, faculty, because each one's going to pick up on something different in the background that might bring out, a good conversation, or might bring out a more negative one, something you don't want to see. Just like your CV, everything that's on there is up for discussion. So everything that's in the background of your video is up for discussion as well. And really just try to remember this is a person. It's hard. We're used to all the videos being really, really passive, sitting and laying back and kind of somewhat listening and maybe doing another chore. But this is supposed to be really active, really engaged. You're still trying to get them to know you. And my other big problem is I talk with my hands a lot, which you're not really supposed to do because they can't see them. So you have to work a lot on your facial expressions and communicating with them.
Yeah. That's one tough thing I think I ran into, is that, you can't read people's body language as well over the Zoom interview. There is some, you usually have multiple people looking at you and you're trying to pay attention to the camera. So, facial reactions and things like that to what you're saying, it's really hard to read from a, personal standpoint, to try and gauge their interests and things like that. So I also would reiterate the fact that you should practice with somebody behind the camera, like your spouse or a family member, to get good lighting and space and sound. I mean, some rooms are very echoey, and so you want to make sure you have good sound quality so people can hear you clearly. And then make sure that you're practicing some of your, interview questions and have some notes in front of you so that you have things to ask the panelists as well.
Yeah, so I'm actually trying to play with the background as we speak. So one of the questions that someone had is, what are your thoughts on having a virtual background? So I'll throw it out to Dr. Scheel. It's a solid mustache still going on there. So what are your thoughts about having a virtual background for these interviews?
I think I kind of like Tiffany's idea better about just kind of like staging what you have, because the virtual backgrounds seem like they get very pixelated, and they don't look as good, I don't think, and then kind of can mess with the lighting and things like that. Obviously, I don't know if that's like the most important thing, in the interview, that you have like a cool snazzy background, but I think that it could be distracting, and it might actually be negative. So I think that's like, with these, so kind of bouncing off some of the things that Tiffany and Eric have said, is these interviews are, you just have, I think the main thing is you have less time to make an impression than you would usually. Even so, even most interviews are already quick, and you already have a short amount of time to make an impression. But in these situations, you don't get to go to the program, you don't get to hang out for the day, you don't get to have lunch with the residents and things like that may make a difference, in the day as a whole, to make your impression. Whereas with these interviews, you have a short period of time. So I think strategizing your interview is super important. So you want to make sure that you know what you want to convey to the interviewer, and you want to make sure that that happens during the interview. So
yeah, so I'm just sorry.
Quick comment. What's interesting is ER doctors are so quick to multitask. We're taught to multitask, so it is almost difficult for us to sit and only do one thing and engage ourselves towards one interview. And I think that's going to be more difficult for us in emergency medicine, because we're so used to doing 3 or 4 different things and juggling 3 different types of tasks all at the same time. But again, I can't reiterate enough with Dr. Arnett, Dr. Scheel, and Dr. Profit, is you have to be engaged in the moment, and there shouldn't be other things going on that could distract you. Kids running around, dogs or cats running around. It is you and the interview, and engagement is hugely important. And once you bring your guard down for just a brief moment, it can cause the interviewer to really start developing their own opinions on whether or not there's an interest in this candidate. So again, I think it's even more difficult for us because we're so used to multitasking, but we really, really need to focus on this one task at hand.
Yeah, so I'm kind of moving around a bit just to make you see that it is extremely, conflicting when you're not paying attention to the interview. I'm playing with lighting right now just to show you things not to do. I think it's important you make sure that this is set up before you even accept your first interview. So hopefully all of you had the experience with the Emma Residency Fair. I think that was a really good spot to start with getting involved and seeing what it looks like, because you can physically see what your facial expressions are, where in a live interview, I've seen applicants yawn and kind of not even doze off, but it seems like they've lost interest. So in a virtual world, you can physically see what you're doing during the process. So I think you have to be on. And most of these interviews are going to be probably 10 to 15 minutes. And you're probably going to have, for us, you're going to have 5 interviews that are 10 minutes in length. So you have to be on for those 5 interviews each time. And hopefully each interview that you go through will be different. So I'm not ignoring you, Dr. Whitworth. I've seen you like 4 times today. So Dr. Whitworth, since Dr. Mancini pointed out, you have the best background and it's so well appropriated. It's like you have 3 circles on each side of your head.
So
why don't you
part of what
dive
I'm
into
talking
this?
about is preparation. So my house is an old Michigan house. We have horrible lighting. So this is very strategic in the fact that across from this mirror is natural light. So it's going to kind of reflect off because I don't have enough light. Before, like 30 minutes before we even had this Zoom session, I, got everything set up. I moved my table. I set my computer up on books. I got the angle right. I did a fake Zoom to make sure that the angle was appropriate. It's all about setting yourself up for success. If you know that, every day at 9:30, the mailman comes and your dogs are going to be barking at the door, either have your dogs go somewhere else or you physically go somewhere else. Threaten your roommates. This is a very important time. I don't need you even in the house. Or if you are, I better not see or hear you. ALIEM, EM Bound newsletter for October has a great list of tips for virtual interviews, as well as some resources about how to check your internet speed, and maybe some mics to buy. So I'd really check that out. I'll go ahead and put the link in the chat, but I think it's very helpful.
Yeah, so
I think that point is super important. Having your space and everybody else that shares your space to understand that this is a very important time, and it has to be quiet, and it has to be something that you can focus on. I don't know if you guys saw the video of that NBA player who was getting asked on Zoom a question about it was something about him wearing a Kobe jersey or something like that. It was kind of it was a good question that the lady asked, but her dogs were barking the whole time, and he never even heard her question, and then she didn't get her question answered. So just an example of distractions can distract both the question asker and the person getting the question asked. So
I'm going to hold everyone real quick because Han has a question. Would it be all right to take or bring notes during the interview? Would that seem too distracting? So why don't you take that one, Dr. Mancini?
I like the engagement. So obviously you're listening, and you're doing a good job of trying to take some notes and being able to make sure your discussion is related to some questions that you have. So I think that's really, really good. I think there's probably better ways than attempting to keep your head down in a piece of paper and a pencil to make notes like that. I think in this day and age, you can probably do it within a chat function, which you'll have the capabilities of obviously doing. But you even have your phone that'll be right next to you, so that your phone, you can take some notes on your phone, literally to the side of you, and you could do it that way too. I also think it's really, really important that you don't do these interviews on a phone. I really think that that's probably the most distracting thing to do. You really should be doing this on some sort of desktop or laptop. Use your phone maybe to keep your notes, or even do some research as you are comparing and contrasting other programs too. So I do like the fact of taking notes. I just don't want your head embedded into a piece of paper and then it appear that you're not looking in an interview.
Also, use your technology. You could record the interviews, and then you wouldn't have to take notes. You can go back and look at them later on. So
hey, just to flip that back, thanks, Dr. Shield, but hey, most of these programs will not let you record anything. In fact, many of them are going to make all students sign a confidentiality agreement that all the videotaping is at the ownership of the individual residency programs.
So don't do that.
So be aware of that. That's coming. That'll probably be embedded in your interviews. But it's a great question, because people are concerned that this information is going to go viral, right? And many programs are already anticipating this and making sure that waivers are going to be executed prior to the interview session.
Sorry, I'm doing things that you shouldn't. So one of our gastroenterologists called me, and I was like, what? That's kind of random. I was like, I hope I didn't kill someone. Anyways, so yeah, I think it's important that your notes you're not taking during. I would use that. You're going to probably have 5 minutes, most likely, between interviews, to write those things down that you may not have picked up. I would come to the interview with probably a notebook to have something written down. So let's,
Can I chime in real quick?
yeah, go ahead,
Dr.
Aaron.
Trigger?
Yeah.
Just because I went through this recently, I think that when I went through my practice sessions with like faculty or with someone in my family, I think that I truncated my notes down to a point where it was just a couple of little things that I had jotted down that would, remind me of anything that I wanted to talk about. And then any small questions at the end, that you could ask about the program, I think is important to kind of have with you. But other than that, I think, try and limit your notes.
So Reed has a question. Thanks, Dr. McCarthy, for pointing that out. Any tips regarding eye contact with camera instead of looking at faces on the screen? Is this something that you even notice? So most of your interviews are going to be one-on-one, or at least hopefully they are. So if you're looking at this feed, most everyone, when I'm speaking, is looking directly at the camera. But you can see eyes wander. But what do you think about that, Dr. Profit?
Yes, I'd say ideally when you're in your one-on-one interview situation, look straight at the camera. And that's another thing in the preparatory phase is see where the camera is located in terms of, relationship to the screen of your computer or your tablet. Because when you're looking directly at the camera, it seems more to the interviewer that you're actually making direct eye contact. And then it seems that it's more one-on-one, more in person, and more personal. It is really hard, especially when we have this gallery view. I can look around and see everybody. And you're not going to have that in the one-on-one. It's just going to be you and the interviewer. So really try to practice looking directly into that camera.
I think how you set up your Zoom feed, which pretty much everyone is going through Thalamus, which is kind of the holder of all of the interviews. The residencies are figuring them out as much as you will be, but it's going to be similar to a Zoom feed. And to be honest, you can actually type notes into your Thalamus section about the program that you probably can save. So we're learning as much about this process as you are. So question, what's your intake on using headphones? So I see Dr. Arnitz, Dr. Scheel, and myself have headphones on. Why don't you, what's your thought on that, Dr. Whitworth, to see how it appears, and then Dr. Scheel respond on what you think.
I guess I don't have a big opinion. I don't own headphones, and so I don't use them. I think they're great if you're worried about, noise from, your vicinity. If you're worried, your roommates upstairs clogging around. I feel like that'd be very helpful and reduce kind of that recurring feed. But I don't use them.
I think that it depends a little bit, and you should practice with them in like practice Zoom sessions, because like the AirPods are actually designed to cut down on echo and things like that. So I think your sound quality is actually better if you're using the AirPods or something similar that has that function to it. But different ones might actually make it worse. So I would just make sure you practice with them.
Go ahead, Dr. Ernst. What do you think?
I didn't, just because I thought, it would be distracting from when you dress up and you have, a suit or a nice dress on or whatnot. But, that's probably is not probably a big difference, or I don't know what the opinions are of other programs on that. I just found a room and made sure that the echo wasn't too big. But, if the echo is a lot and when you practice, then I think that you may consider using headphones. And the wireless ones are going to look a lot better than a wired set like mine that I'm using right now. Just because I know that I have a lot of stuff going on in the background. I have a family in my house. And so I just grabbed a pair of headphones, but normally I probably wouldn't recommend it in my case, just because I don't own any AirPods or anything.
Yeah, and the wireless ones are more expensive, and I don't think anybody's gonna like judge you for not having wireless headphones or
yeah, no.
You're med students and you're not supposed to have really fancy, expensive stuff. So
yeah, I think it's important. we keep talking about practice. Everything we do is about practice, right? And this is just a kind of one of these next hoops you have to jump through to get to where you want to go, right? And that's the same thing in medical school. It'll be the same thing in residency. It's just these hoops that you have to get through. So accept it and own it, but you have to practice. If you don't practice at it, how are you going to exceed at it? So I think, yeah, I mean, this is kind of distracting, but I like the fact that I'm engaged. Like, I don't have outside distractions from hearing other noises. You know, my 2 kids are here, my wife, and I'm sitting out, you know, in the patio because I know what they're doing right now. So it would be chaotic. So you really, really need to find your space and your time. So Joe, I'm sorry, I don't know if I missed any questions. Well, there's a lot.
Man, these are some killer questions that these students are asking right now.
All right, let me go through this chat list. Keep going, Dr. Whit.
If you think about it, this year you're not having to pay for, you know, flights or travel for interviews. So you could use this as a good opportunity to invest in some earphones that you really want.
Technology in general, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so currently, I'm not telling you to go out and buy a new computer, but Apple is offering, if you buy a new computer, you get AirPods for free. That's such ridiculous marketing, but I'm probably going to buy a new computer just to get AirPods, which is dumb.
Trigger, how much you making from Apple, huh?
I don't make any, you know, I wish I did, you know, but I was recording. So it's funny. I was recording a podcast with Bayer earlier and we talked about this and I can edit as I go. So Tiffany, you really need to use GarageBand regarding podcasts. It is so much easier. I'm sorry, but I make nothing from Apple. I do
Full disclosure.
So I do on stock. So I guess that is somewhat of a conflict of interest. There's a long question here that I'm going to try to read through. So if anyone wants to chime in about God knows what, go ahead. And I'm going to get this question answered.
Hey, as Trigger's reading, obviously takes them a while. There are a lot of stuff as it relates to background on the virtual interviews. I don't think, as long as it's not distracting and it represents you. So for instance, Dr. Shielder might want to have University of Nebraska logos on the back of his virtual interview. I don't think it's that big of a deal. So if it represents you and it's a talking point and it's not distracting, I think a lot of places would be fine with virtual backgrounds.
All right, here's a question from Catherine. Welcome from the University of Chicago. Over the years, what have been some of your favorite or most meaningful topics of conversation to discuss with interviewers that you feel are specific to your program? Well, now, Catherine, that gives away everything that we do here at Spectrum Health Lakeland. So we're not going to divulge too much information because there is an element of surprise. But everyone's interviewed with us, obviously, since they're former residents and current residents and or faculty. So what topics do you like to talk about? Why don't we start with, we'll just go around the room. Dr. Mancini, I'll start with you since you're the shortest.
Yeah, I'm not going to give away my questions because I love my questions, so I'm not going there. But
we also all know that you reuse them. So does Nolan.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, so I think the biggest thing we're trying to do at Spectrum Health Lakeland when you are interviewing with us is we're trying to learn what makes you tick and trying to learn what you have an interest in pursuing in the future. In order for us to do that, we're really trying to make sure that we learn what kind of a person you are and try to understand who you are. The medicine aspect, we're not really concentrating on. We're not going to give you an EKG or a chest x-ray and have you read something like that. We just want to know that you fit. You fit our personality traits. You fit what we're looking for in our family-oriented type of residency program. So it's really a discussion trying to gauge how well you understand what our residents stand for and what we're looking for in the future. So really our discussions are really genuine in the aspects of trying to learn about you, maybe trying to learn about things that you've had to overcome and obstacles you needed to overcome in life, but we are never going to focus on medicine as it relates to your interview because your portfolio in ARIS already describes it. We know what your board scores are. We know what your SLOs are. We know where you graduated from. We know your research interest. We're just trying to learn and whether or not at midnight, at 2 o'clock in the morning, can we have conversations about anything that would allow a collegial environment in the emergency department? Because again, at the end of the day, we're all friends, we're all family members, and we want to be able to make sure that those conversations we're having during residency are really going to be purposeful for us in the long run, right? So if I can't get along with you in an interview, and I don't even want to have a discussion with you in an interview setting, I can't imagine trying to be involved with attempting to teach you for 3 years in residency, right? So we just want to know you fit.
Dr. Whitworth, what kind of questions do you, maybe some of the topics, let's give an overall view of the topics that you may ask about.
I really enjoy hearing about what everyone's doing outside the hospital, what they do on their day off or when they get home from a shift. Because really I'll find that either we have something in common and then we have a lot to talk about, or I'll learn about something new that I had no idea was even a thing. And I also get really excited about that. So some of my favorite things that I have learned from students and interviews. So I just want to hear about what they're passionate about outside of the hospital.
One more can respond to this. I don't care who. Go ahead. Anyone, because one. So
I think that the interaction is a lot more important than the content. Like how you're interacting, how you're getting along with your interviewer is much more important. Making sure you're not like walking over them with their questions, interrupting, and just like common civil conversation type rules are really important. And then one point just to Mancini's, Lakeland will not ask you things about medicine, but other places will. So just know that does happen sometimes.
All right, so here's another question. For students who have been attending virtual webinars for programs of interest, is it necessary to have questions for faculty, PDs, APDs, if all the questions have been answered previously through those webinars? So Dr. Prophet, why don't you take a stab at that one? So should you have questions for the interviewer, even if they've been answered already?
I'd say absolutely. Because to be honest, the interviewer does not know probably if you have been at these virtual sessions. They might know generally that your name was there, but they're not going to really remember what questions were asked, how they were asked, and maybe they have a different answer when it's in the interview setting, something that's more formal or adds a different facet. I'd say to just have, it's hard with all of these virtual webinars. You're getting a different sense of the programs, and I feel in some way you're actually getting a closer look because you're having this more one-on-one dedicated time because you don't have to physically go to the hospital. And so it's easy to feel complacent and say, well, I have all my questions answered. They should know I was at these webinars. So why do I need any more? And you just want to just really be cautious to come up with anything, even if it's repeating questions, so that they know you're interested in. Because that interview time is their dedicated one-on-one time where they're really focusing and examining you and your interest in the program. And to not have any questions is going to be a red flag to them.
Yeah, so realize that most of us are doing a lot of these Emma residency fairs or live Zooms, and it's really hard for us to keep track of all the names of the students. I mean, it's flattering that the 10 of you have joined us tonight, but some of my, the other core faculty aren't going to know that. And we need, you're going to meet with at least, 5 of us. You should really have a question for each one of us during the interview, whether it's been answered before or not. You may want to get a different spin on it. So I think we all have different ideas. I mean, our core, and we're all a family. Everyone here is probably going to answer most of the questions the same way, which is great to hear because there's nothing we're hiding. So I think just to get an authentic answer from someone different is hugely important. So go ahead, Dr. Sheila. I think you were going to chime in, and then I'm going to get to the next question after that.
I was going to say the same thing. I just think that getting a different perspective is really important. Even if you think you've had your question answered, the same program, different person might give you just a little bit different spin on it. So.
Yeah, so the next question, Reed, I'll get to you. I just saw yours popped up, but regarding topics of discussion, are there current event sources that we should be reviewing, such as Journal Club or hot button topics? I guess, Dr. Arnitz, I'll throw that to you since you're the resident in the room.
I don't necessarily think that like other people have iterated that our personal like interview sessions really, concentrate on like current medical topics. I don't need to know that you read the latest New England Journal article about coronavirus right now. We really want to know, who you are as a person, and kind of get to know, to see like, what kind of person you are and what kind of fit you would be to our program. I don't know. I think I've had maybe other interviews, if I remember back, where there might have been one question about a specific topic during an interview that was like medical knowledge. But here at Lakeland, I don't think we typically do that. So it's not really a focus for us.
So the other thing to keep in mind for you students too is that some of the questions that are going to be asked to learn more about you are really behavioral questions. They're going to put you in a scenario that says, hey, have you ever been in a scenario before that a patient misinterpreted something that you were trying to describe to them? And what did you do in that scenario? They want to know how you're going to react, and in scenarios that really aren't pleasant, but you find a way to describe scenarios or events in which you have been able to overcome different patient encounters, right? So they want to know that you're not going to blow up when somebody walks into the room and becomes irate. They're going to want to know that you have the ability to negotiate with patients and families, right? So being able to describe those type of behavioral examples that you've dealt with in your career are going to be really, really important, because they want to know you can navigate so many different personalities that you're going to meet as a doctor working in the emergency department. So having examples of that are really, really important.
So the next question is, and Dr. Mancini, you're probably going to have to chime in on this. The format of the interview day is quite a bit. What would you recommend to prepare for these differences? So just a brief overview of kind of what we're going to do here. So you're going to have basically a formal meet and greet like this, where Dr. Mancini is kind of going to give an overview of the program and talk about the day. And then you're going to have breakout sessions where you're going to have 5 interviews. They're going to be 10 minutes at length, and you're going to have 5 minutes between interviews is the way we're going to work this. And then if you're done with your interviews, because depending on how many people we interview a day, you'll be able to, because the other question was, will we get to interact with other residents other than the chiefs? So you'll be able to interact with the other residents in one of these live chat rooms. And also we have, one thing that hasn't come up, which I'll kind of address now, is the pre-dinner. So the night before dinner, we're planning on having still, it's kind of bizarre, but correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Mancini, but each and every applicant that's invited to interview here will get a Grubhub certificate to order whatever they want. And then we're going to have an hour to hour and a half dinner where you have 2 breakout rooms that are going to be coordinated with our chief residents that you'll be meeting with some of the other residents. So why don't you add a little bit more if you want, Dr. Mancini?
Yeah, Dr. Trigger is completely right. I think we're using DoorDash because it looks like it might be better than Grubhub, but regardless of it, all the same. So, every format's going to be a little different at multiple different places. Some places are going to feed you probably some videos about themselves. A lot of the websites should actually have some of that content. But really, in order for you to prepare for virtual interviews where you can have 4 to 5 people interviewing you separately, the more you know about yourself, the more genuine you are about where you've been and where you plan on going, that's all they're trying to get out of you. And the beauty about these interviews is faculty members will go through anywhere between 50 or 60 interviews in a year. And if you can imagine doing these over 10 years, these people have become really good at interviewing and probably really good at sniffing out canned answers, right? You don't want canned answers. You want genuine, emotional, authentic answers. So the more you know about yourself, which is easily done just by talking to your spouse, talking to friends and family, the easier that conversation is going to be with the interviewer. So they're not going to ask you questions that are going to stump you. They're going to ask you questions about, tell me about something you had to overcome in your life. And then that discussion or that topic will lead to another question. But the more you know about yourself, the more genuine you are about yourself, the easier these interactions will be. Believe me, they want to learn about you because they find you interesting, and you should find them interesting also. I'm using my hands, Tiffany, I'm sorry.
You know, Dr. Prophet,
I'll give you Dr. Mancini.
and go ahead, Dr. Prophet, how would you prepare for a format such as that, where you have 5 interviews and you get put in these rooms during your breaks? So how would you prepare for that?
I'd say a few things. Remind yourself how long each interview is, because I know I get confused when one is 5, one is 10, one is 15. And even after you've gone through a few, you lose track of time and you think, oh my goodness, is this a 5-minute or is this a 10-minute? And then you find yourself stuck in the middle and you feel that you've run out of questions to say, or you didn't answer the questions that you wanted to in the way you did. Also, even when you have the breaks and you're in those break rooms in between each interviewer, still remind yourself that you're not muted. You are on camera. It's probably being recorded by the program. This is not the time to, kind of start talking maybe inappropriately or just watching TV or a movie or something in the background. They're going to notice. So it's really, again, really easy when you're at home and then you're put into these little break rooms to think this is a perfect safe zone. Not that it's not safe, but you're still being watched.
Anyone else want to answer? How would you prepare for this interview style of interviews?
I think that you kind of like what Dr. Mancini was saying is that you kind of need to strategize this based on what do you know about yourself and what do you think is some of your qualities that program's going to be looking for, and not just reacting to their questions, not just knowing like, okay, if they ask me what hurdle I had to overcome, this is what I'm going to say. It's kind of about making sure that the conversations do go to those topics that you want to come up and that you want to tell them about you, because there's a lot of really special, incredible people that are interviewing for residency, and you'll have like really amazing things to tell people. So just make sure that you get those out there during the interview.
And if I may jump back in, sorry, it's like, just exactly what Tim said. And going back a little bit more to the background discussion, I think that this is the perfect way to set everything up, to have those few pieces, even if it's 1 or 2 things that you really, really want to talk about, because you can address it in your room. And then it brings that interviewer more into your room and your space, and doesn't make it feel so separated like it does on the big Zooms. And that way you can make sure that point, that life experience, that moment that you want to share, that you feel truly represents you, gets addressed.
Okay, go ahead, Eric.
I was just gonna kind of make a little bit of an analogy. You want to strategize about, think about how you present a patient, about how you'd want, to present yourself, and paint a picture about the things that you know about yourself that you want to convey to the program that are important. And so, like Dr. Mancini said, like just talking with your spouse, important things about you will come up, and kind of work on painting that picture about how you want to convey those things about yourself.
So one of our 4th years is going on an interview tomorrow, and he asked me, and this is something you guys should think about as you're going through this process, or you begin it. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? If you don't have an answer for that question alone, that shouldn't be a canned answer, but it should be, you should know what people think of you and where you can improve and what areas you can improve in, because I can guarantee you're going to get that question answered probably every interview. So just remember that. there is another question. I'm sorry I missed it. It was from Catherine again. Do you feel, given that you will be unable to meet with us in person, do you feel there's anything in particular you are more interested in discussing this year? And that,
Catherine, I think the same intentional questions that we give every year are going to be the same questions we're asking again. And again, being yourself is really the important thing throughout all of this. Also, being yourself when you are having breakout sessions with residents, maybe the night before, or maybe that day of the interviews, where it feels like it's a little bit more laid back. Even though it's more laid back and the discussions having with the residents, you're still somewhat on an interview, right? Because remember, the residents are involved a lot of times with selection process and rank processes as it relates to different medical students. So yeah, it might be more casual with these breakout sessions with the residents, but it's still an interview, and always keep that in your back of your mind too, because I think that's really, really, really important.
And realize that you are interviewing with the program. The program has to sell themselves to you. You've done your research, but the program still has to sell you on where you want to be. I mean, you're most likely going to select the program based upon location, but you really have to feel like you fit in. It's got to be that gut feeling. So just realize the program's going to sell them as much as you are to them. So realize that. We're going to go for about another 10 minutes. So if there are any other questions, please post them. If you guys are tired of us already, we understand. I can never get tired of these people. And that's the great thing about our program. So any other questions, please post. Does anyone have anything to say? Oh, sorry. Question just popped up. During these dinner breakout sessions that are supposedly casual, they are casual. Is it still better to dress up formally, or will there be a dress code that let us know how to dress? So, Dr. Whitworth, well, actually all of our alumni and former resident, why don't you answer that, Dr. Whitworth, and then I'll let everyone else chime in too.
I would probably wear whatever you would normally wear if you were going out to dinner with like a group of friends, or pretend that this was actually going to be an in-person dinner. So, not your sportswear, not PJs, but like just, like for here, usually we do like jeans and like a sweater or flannel plus a vest is usually, the uniform for our dinners. So, I mean, just,
always.
how you would, if you're going to go out into public, that's what you should wear.
Anyone else?
I mean, you could always ask what's expected of dress attire before the event. Yes, it's probably not gym shorts, but it's also probably not a tuxedo. It's somewhere in between.
I don't think anybody should take any fashion advice from you, though.
I knew that was coming.
Well played, Whitworth. Well played.
I think to remember that we are EM. We're not, people are very laid back in our specialty for the most part. So those types of casual, like dinner types of things are going to be that. Nobody's going to be trying to trap you or anything like that. So.
All right. So here's a question that always comes up. How would you let the program know that you are highly interested without violating ARIS? And is it appropriate to tell the interviewer that you have them high on your list? If so, what would be good phrasing for that?
Do you guys have any examples of how to show interest without telling a PD or a manager that you're highly interested? What other things can you do?
One option is just making sure you stay in contact. So, every month, make sure you send some form of contact to the program, whether that be a faculty member that you really connected with, one of the residents, the director. Just make sure you're staying in contact so your name's constantly showing up. And I said this. I mean, I didn't say the word rank, but this is where I want to come to residency. Absolutely. And I think you can be honest. You don't have to say the words, top rank, but just be honest with the program. But that goes the same. Don't tell a program that you don't plan on going to, that, you absolutely want to go there. That's not good form.
And probably don't tell them you don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, I think that, things like that you want to avoid, like Tim said, because, the EM community is still like the program, the PDs know each other, the programs talk. So if you say something strange and it's not matching up with what, sometimes that stuff gets around. I think that it's, important, like what's been said, to stay in good contact with the program that you're interested in. My way of talking about it was that I felt that it, was a place that I could see myself and my family living at for residency and whatnot. And I felt good at the program and the people there. So that's all.
Hey, I just got a question for the panel across. What was one of the coolest questions you ever got asked on an interview?
Teach me something. I remember that one.
I guess I have asked. I don't know if Mancini's going to like it, but I've used it in our interviews. No?
Don't do it.
Don't do it. That's a hard question, Mancini.
Feels like forever ago.
One program put a pulse ox on my finger and then made me hunt for things in an I Spy book. My heart rate before I even started was 110. So it could only go up from there. So it went really well.
If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower and why?
That's a good one. I'd say I don't know. I had one where it was terrible, but it was like they printed out some corporate interviewing guide and just went through these questions that did not relate to medicine or residency or EM at all. It was all very, like, they just went to a website on interview questions and pulled out some big, like, Fortune 500 companies list of HR questions.
That's terrible.
So I'm going to interrupt. We got 5 minutes left.
Okay.
If any of the med students want any other questions, please post them. I think just from watching from the background, one of the things that everybody did here really well is they know where their mute button is. I know it's very small and trivial, but when you're in kind of like the groups like this where there's a lot of people, just know where to mute, know where to turn your video off just in case you need to stand up or move your dog or animal or kid. I don't know if everybody's probably on Twitter by now, but Esther Chu, she was on CNN and her kid showed up and she kind of had to shoo her out recently. So things happen. We get it. We're not going to like downgrade you just because something happens. I was telling some of the panelists here before you all joined, we're in emergency medicine and we're all pretty flexible. So I think our interviews will be a little bit more lax than some other specialties, but definitely take them seriously, like everything's mentioned here. So if there's any more questions, I just want to kind of get those points in just kind of from watching from behind the scenes. And yes, I did make some comments regarding Dr. Mancini's camera and microphone and internet setup. He would probably have to spend $100 to $200 to make his better, which I think we all agree. I think he's setting a good example of how it could be improved. I am not in a good setting. This is not professional. Just sitting here, I think the majority of us, I think Dr. Whitworth, Dr. Crawford, Dr. Shield, and Dr. Arnitz have something set up where it's at shoulder level. They're kind of staring at the camera. It just looks more professional just watching it from behind the scenes. No offense, Dr. Trigger, but you're kind of like intimidating me. I think you're gonna like yell at me or punch me through the screen.
Coming into the camera.
Exactly. So body
you might have
mannerisms
played
will be
with
looked
light,
at, but it's not gonna be all or anything. I think being relaxed and laid back, but remembering it's professional is probably one of the biggest things. So if you guys have any more comments, please post them, and we'll probably talk for 3 minutes and then I'll close it because I gotta go put my kids to bed, and then go from there.
So I would add into this, make sure you have a comfortable chair. That's also why I'm sitting forward, because I did not plan for this really. Our leader abuses us here and tells us what we have to do and gives us zero time to prepare and whatnot. And it's like, well, yeah, you're all doing this, right? So anyway, yeah, make sure, yeah, that's funny, Tiffany. Make sure, just have your setup just before you even start this process, man. Have your setup, and make sure it's comfortable. Now the dogs of Lakeland. We have
so don't worry, all this part can be, this part will be edited out for the posting of the YouTube part.
There's Sarge.
About 20 minutes ago, I posted it's derailing, and I think we're very close to getting there. So,
any other questions, guys? 9 of you left. Any more?
Oh, here we go. Question to Mancini.
Would it be a good idea to send interest emails to other PDs, or is it better to send faculty residents as or is it better to send to the faculty residents as Dr. Whitworth mentioned?
You know, I don't know if this answer is strictly my answer or other answers that other PDs will have too. The residents, the medical students are sending emails often and numerous to the PDs and faculty members. I think it's difficult for them to weed through all of those emails all the time. That's why Dr. Whitworth's response about during the interview, if you really click with a faculty member, ask them if it's okay to you follow up with them for an email. Don't worry, that information will eventually make it back to the PD. But I think it's really difficult for PDs to dredge through so many additional emails when they're going through 1,000 ARIS applications. So I think the connection with residents and faculty is going to be more timely than with the PD. So that's probably more realistic in my opinion.
So I do give out my card to, well, I can't this year, but I have given out my card to all all medical students in the past. So anyone that interviewed or would interview with me, I would expect an email if they were interested in the program. And that goes, to be honest, if I get an email from a medical student, it goes directly to Michelle, our program coordinator, and Dr. Mancini. So, and then that communication line is open between us and you guys. So make sure you send those emails. You don't have to send it to everyone, but send it to a couple. So any more questions? Last question.
From Sammy, is it appropriate to contact the program before the interview?
I think it's dependent upon what you're asking. If you're asking questions related to the agenda for that day or anticipation of what to wear for maybe a resident meet and greet, I think that's appropriate. I think it's probably not appropriate to ask for things that are probably irrelevant before the interview itself. But I truly believe that we want to do a good job in preparing you for an interview day. And if you think asking a question related to what I should wear, or maybe what type of internet connection, whether it's via Google, Chrome, or maybe IE or Firefox, whatever is the best way to access Zoom or whatever platform, I think those are all good questions.
So his question was more related to before you get invited to an interview. So I think we're all in the same boat this year because ARIS is releasing at a much later date. It's October 21st versus I think last year was September 15th, give or take. So we have 1 month less of time. So the more you contact us up front, to be honest, is, in my opinion, not helpful at all. Because it's just adding to the stress of paring down 1,000 to 1,200 applications to the 180 to 200 that we're going to interview. So sending questions before you're invited for an interview is probably not helpful, to be honest. I don't know if we'll actually get to all of them. So, all right, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you guys for joining. I think this was a fantastic session that Dr. Mancini forced upon us, but Dr. Mancini gets his way. He's post night, which is a rare accomplishment for him.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, he did have to weasel his way out of a Niles night, though. That's all. Not forget. Let's put that on the recording.
When was the last time you worked at Niles?
Thank you, Dr. McCarthy.
1962.
Yeah, 1962. So thank you, Dr. Whitworth. Thank you, Dr. Ernst. Thank you, Dr. Prophet. And thank you, Dr. Shield, for joining. We'll catch up again. See you guys soon. Thanks to all the medical students.
Thanks, guys. Great job.
Join it.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Oh,
Killing
miss
it.
you.
Yeah, good luck, everybody.